By you clearing out your wounds and finding out how, no matter what's happened in your life, how you can use it to your advantage, gives them an example of what's possible to do the same. So that's pretty cool. But no matter what you've done or not done, you're worthy of love. And the same thing for your kids. Well, many of you who have beautiful children um, gyrate in the perceptions, the self perceptions of how well you do as a parent. Sometimes you feel proud, sometimes you feel ashamed, sometimes you build yourself up, sometimes you beat yourself down. So there's many gyrations as a parent. So my presentation today is about maybe taking a look and maybe it's time to stop beating yourself up as a parent. So why do we beat ourselves up? Well, anytime we compare ourselves to other people and we think that somehow those children and that parenting style is better than ours, we sometimes minimize ourselves as a result of exaggerating them. We may not see the whole story. Many times we don't see some of the downsides of that style, of that parenting structure. And we then go and compare ourselves to that and judge ourselves. Anytime we compare ourselves to others, we're going to distort our view of ourselves. If we put them on a pedestal, we'll minimize ourselves. If we put them in a pit, we'll exaggerate ourselves. And neither one of those minimizations or exaggerations are us. That's not our authentic self. And sometimes we have expectations that are not necessarily individual because of a comparison of an individual, but to an ideal, a social ideal. A lot of things we taught in school are moral hypocrisies. They're expecting human beings to be one-sided. You know, I've asked thousands of people, and I mean thousands, how many have ever been bullied before? And most every hand goes up. How many have ever bullied somebody? Most every hand goes up. But then sometimes the schools say zero tolerance for bullying, but yet every human being, including the people who are bullied and bullying, um, are there. And they've been there and done that, and they've survived it, and they lived it, and life went on. So sometimes we try to overprotect our children, and then we need something like the bully to come in their life to kind of wake them up and make them grow up. I'm a firm believer that support and challenge, maximum growth and development occurs at the border of support and challenge. And sometimes one parent is the overprotector, and the other one's the challenger and the aggressive one, and the two make up love. We have this fantasy that support without challenge and kind without cruel and nice without mean and positive without negative is somehow what we should be doing. And these moral hypocrisies, nobody's going to live by, but everybody's going to think they're supposed to live by it and then beat themselves up. And this comes from sometimes people that are wounded, that have been maybe challenged in their life and were addicted to peace and kind and sweet and everything else. And then when they got the challenge that they needed to grow, they judged it. And then they went out and became parenting experts to try to prevent people from doing what they're frightened of and they're wounded by. Sometimes parenting experts are actually just people who've been wounded by things and projecting the opposite of what they've been wounded by to try to protect people in the society from their wounds instead of growing through their wounds and finding how it served them. I'm a firm believer that some of the things that we think are terrible that we would want to prevent actually served us. And so beware. I had this lady who was in Washington that attended my breakthrough experience program. And she was, I'm going to guess, around 33, 34 years old. She had a couple children, and she'd read this book about how to be the perfect mom kind of thing. I called her Miss Tofu for a joke because she was trying to make sure that everything was natural foods and natural cotton diapers and hand cleaning. I mean, it was just crazy the extreme she went to. And then, of course, she was now working her butt off doing things. And she was a doctor and gave up being a doctor to go and be this perfect mom. And then, in the process of doing that, she was upset with her husband because he was having to work harder because they both had an income. And now all of a sudden, he's having to work harder. And all of a sudden, they have a bigger house for the kids. And now she's wanting him to come home and do the thing she didn't really want to do, but she thinks she should be doing it because that's what she read in the book. And she didn't realize until I asked her a question, was the person who wrote the book a doctor? And she said no. And did she have a source of income that was potentially greater than what she being taken care of by her husband. And she said, no. I said, well, anytime you compare yourself with your set of values with somebody else that has a different set of values, and you expect to live in their values, you're going to beat yourself up. So she was making herself feel like it was overwhelming. She felt she was not living up to expectations. She was projecting anger onto her husband. And she was withdrawing from her career, which was upsetting her, and taking it out on the kids and taking it out on him. And she was trying to be this so-called perfect mom, according to this book written by somebody that didn't have a doctorate degree and didn't have a way of getting income, and had a husband that was taking care of her and was focused mainly on kids and had the time to go and do cleaning of diapers and maid service. So I made her stop and kind of put things into context and wake up and make sure she wasn't trying to compare herself to somebody else with a different set of values and then create a moral hypocrisy on herself about how she should be. Anytime you hear yourself using language like I got to, I have to, I must, I should, I ought to, supposed to, I need to, whatever, you're probably injecting the values of outer authorities about how you should be. And if you do, you'll probably beat yourself up as a parent because you're thinking you should be this. But if you look very carefully, that sometimes the very things you do are exactly what's needed for the child, and it just doesn't match the norm. You know, if I look at Sir Isaac Newton, his father died when he was a child, when he was born, literally on the day he was born, I believe. And then he had a mother that had to go out and find another man, and she had to temporarily give the child over to somebody else to take care of while she was trying to find a man to take care of her because she had no income. And so he basically raised for a while without a father and a mother. And, we could easily say, well, he was, kind of an orphan for a while and kind of a foster child in a while and was abandoned for a while. And we could come up with all those things like some psychobabble and psychologists like to come up with to blame and be a victim of. But he became one of the greatest scientists in history, wrote Principia and did amazing things and became he's knighted by the queen kind of thing and one of the great people in history. And whenever I see people that think they had a terrible childhood, I just go, okay, what happened? And then I go and find out, so how did that serve you? And how are you using it to your advantage? And who else that's done extraordinary things had that same beginning? And wake them up and make sure they don't get caught in this social idealism about how you're supposed to be raised. Because I've never met two people that were raised the same. So what is norm and what's average and what is ideal sometimes is murky. And of course, in different cultures, there's different motives and different needs. And today, kids don't usually leave home until their 20s and 30s. And when I was a kid, you're out by teens. So so if they're mollycoddled into their 30s, are they really being matured and grown up? Or are they basically being wussied and pussied, you might say? So these are all questions that we could come up with. But so the bottom line is, did you learn to communicate what you valued and what you felt was important for the child, in terms of the child's values, so they would take on and inculcate some of those ideas that you felt were essential? And did you teach the child how to get what the child wanted and learn how to, achieve what it has? Did you care about the child? Did you have love for the child, which most parents do? Um, I jokingly said one time at a parent conference, made everybody just absolutely burst into laughter. I said my definition of a successful parent was, did they survive? All these parents started laughing, and because the parents have to survive through this experience of raising kids, because the kids are fun to they challenge it and take you to the limit sometimes. But bottom line is, do you care? And do you love your children? And are you intending to do what you can to assist them in fulfilling what's meaningful to them? And really realize that you're sometimes what you think is caring is actually a projection of your wounds onto them. And you're trying to prevent them from going through what you haven't found the benefits in your life that you're still a victim of, instead of actually empowering yourself by finding out how whatever happened in your life served you. That's why I tell people to come to the breakthrough experience, to clear all the baggage that they're carrying around, because otherwise they're going to project those fears and anxieties onto the child. I noticed that my mom and dad had different views. My mom would say, be careful about this, and she'd be protective a little bit. And my dad said, he'll figure it out. And if he gets bruised, he'll learn from it. That's how he learns. You don't sit there and protect somebody from learning their experiences. I remember I grew up when I was in my 20s at Texas Children's Hospital. I was doing a part job there, and also Texas Heart Institute in St. Luke's. hospital, and there was a bubble baby, and he was an overprotected baby, and he had no immune response, and so they had to keep him in this bubble. And I thought, well, this is a classical example. The more you try to overprotect and keep buddies safe, and they don't get involved in infections, they don't get anything. Sometimes their immune system is not adapted and prepared. So you need a little bit of challenge in life, and my experience is, if you go through your life and find out how, no matter what happened to you, how does it serve you? And you find out that whatever you see, you look for its opposite. So if you had somebody that was aggressive, where was the overprotector? Find it. If you see them synchronously, neither one of them are affecting you. And then once the parent sees that, and parent understands that the more they're trying to protect the child, the more somebody, the bully comes in, or the father comes in assertively, or the sister or brother become the assertive one and aggressive one. Once you see that there's a maximum need for both the testosterone and estrogen, the male and feminine, what was traditionally that, today it's murky because of genders, spectrums. But the reality is, you need both. You need kind and cruel and nice and mean and positive and negative and support and challenge and peace and war, and every family gets that. So beware of idealisms and fantasies about how you're supposed to be and should be and got to be and have to be based on somebody's ideal, which is usually a result of a wound that they haven't seen the benefits to, and then they set up an idealism that tries to protect people from their wounds, and then they call that parenting. But the bottom line is, the child is going to need both sides. Maximum growth and development occurs at the border of the pairs of opposites: support and challenge, and nice and mean, etc. So both are needed. The estrogen of support and the testosterone of challenge, the rest and digest and the fight or flight mechanisms. We have an autonomic nervous system for both, and we need both. If you overprotect a child and keep it from ever having any challenges at all, it's probably going to become dependent, juvenile like. It doesn't have any accountabilities, responsibilities. We think that's the way it is. I've actually seen people think that's what love is. No, that's keeping the child dependent and not capable of handling reality and not being resilient and adaptable. It needs accountabilities, responsibilities, and challenges, and it needs assertiveness, and it needs to know how to deal with aggressive people and all the different types of people. The more experiences you have, I think, the more adaptable and resilient you become. So if you gave them not an ideal according to somebody that wrote a book, and by the way, if you get 100 books on parenting, you're going to see variations all over the place, and they're going to range from almost complete opposites. I was sitting in one of my training programs and teaching the Demartini method that I teach in the breakthrough experience, and I had a lady there, and she she all of a sudden gets a call from the police department, and she says, I said, "What happened?" And she said, "I just got a call from the police department. My son's in jail. He got caught with marijuana." And this is back when marijuana was not like it is today, kind of open and sold, and it was illegal. And so he got caught with marijuana, and he'd stolen a car. So he stole a car and got caught with pot. And she's sitting there just devastated and beating herself up and thinking, I've been a working woman. I should have been home with my kids. I should have been there, and I should have done this. And I'm supposed to be doing that. She's beating herself up and thinking she failed as a mother. And I'm sitting there just calm, just watching this whole thing go down. And there's a lady sitting right next to her. And this lady pats her on the back and says, to her, she says, "Stop this whining. That's a bunch of BS." And patted and interrupted her. And she turned and looked at her, and why do you say that? I said, "My son, 3 weeks ago, got caught with pot and stole a car, exactly what your son did. But I was there every single day, took him everywhere he wanted to go, and did everything I didn't. I sacrificed my career for my kids. I did everything that you swore you should have done, and I thought I should have done what you did. I thought should have been more of a leader and more of be true to myself and go after what I wanted." And they both had this illusion that they should have done this. And they all thought it was a greener pasture. And then I said to them, if they turned to me, and I said, "Well, both your sons are going to turn fine. They're going through a teenage crazies, and that's part of it. And, sitting beating yourself up, and you're going to do. Let's go and have a conversation with the son, and let's go meet with them and talk to them and find out what they learned from the experience and what they're going to do, go through it." Now, one son ended up being, involved in a computer company and has a massive computer company and became a multimillionaire and end up buying a car at the dealership he stole a car from, which is irony. And the other one ended up being a musician and was not as driven financially as much, but does what he loves. And they both are doing something amazing with their lives today. And so, they're great contributions to society, and they went through a crazy period, and they end up doing some things, and that's part of life. But you're sitting there, and now the parents sometimes when they see the child do something that matches social ideals, they take credit for it, and they go, "I'm proud of you, son." By the way, when say yourself you're proud of them, you're not proud of what they did. You're proud of what you did to lead them to that. Pride is not what they do. That's admiration. Pride is what you did to get that. And then you can also beat yourself up and feel ashamed, and you can gyrate with all these different ideals that you're comparing yourself to. But the reality is, did you love them? And did you give them both? And beware of the false, moral hypocrisies about one-sidedness. I was told by my grandmother, be nice, don't be mean. Be kind, don't be cruel. Be pleasant, don't be pleasant. Be considerate, don't be inconsiderate. Be generous, don't be stingy. Be giving, don't be taking, right? Be peaceful, don't stop fighting and all that. And then 5 minutes later, she'd beat the hell out of grandpa and yell at him and ask for money or something. The very opposite of what she was just telling us to do. And it was like, tell us one thing, live another. So watch out for moral hypocrisies about how you're supposed to be, and look at what you're actually doing, and know that if you live most authentically, you're exemplifying what's possible for them. Einstein said the greatest teacher is exemplification. And if you're doing something that you're really inspired to do, and it's meaningful, and it makes a difference in the world, and it contributes, and you learn the art of communicating what you value in terms of what your children value, which is changing as they grow, and keeping current with what they value, and finding out how what they value serves you, so you can respect them enough to communicate what you value in a way that they win and they get what they want that way, then you end up having some sort of dialogue and communication that's probably respectful. But beware of ideals and fantasies of one-sidedness, because frankly, I'm not a nice person. I'm not a mean person. I'm not a kind person or a cruel person. I'm a human being with a set of values. And if you support my values, I'm nice as a pussycat and kind. And then if you challenge me, I can be mean as a tiger and cruel. I'm both. And every parent that I know has got both sides to them. They have a set of values, and they can have their buttons pushed and become aggressive, and they can be very passive, and they can be nice and mean and all that. So calm down the expectations of yourself to be a one-sided individual by some social idealism that's not even real, promoted by somebody that's usually wounded, that's setting up an ideal that is basically because they were hurt by the other and they're now trying to create an ideal, or some social construct or idealism that society thinks you're supposed to do, that's not necessarily true, that doesn't necessarily make you stand out. Our main education system in school is not necessarily designed for entrepreneurs. It's designed for drones to work for a company and to get in debt with banks, to get a house and a mortgage, a quarter of which is basically storing crap. And when you stop and look at what you're basically being educated to do, it may not be the most masterful path. So beware. As Paul Dirac, the Nobel Prize winner, said, it's not that we don't know so much, we know so much that isn't so. So beware of the idealisms that are making you compare yourself to things that aren't necessarily true, and then beat yourself up thinking, I should have done this. Did you love your children in your heart? If a child's born, and imagine you got a baby in your hands and it's just hours old or whatever, and it looked up at you and it could speak and it said, what are your credentials? And you kind of laughed. You go, well, I don't have a lot of credentials of raising a kid. Well, obviously educating yourself, but beware of educating yourself on social fantasies and ideals about how it's supposed to be by wounded individuals. Get real about human behavior. That's why I've been studying human behavior for 51 years, because we go through and we go around the world and we find all kind of variations about how people are raising kids and doing things. And somehow there's children that come out of it, and all those children are needed. Everybody's needed in the world. And my sister was raised by the same parents, and she's different than I am, and I'm different than her, and she's a magnificent girl and lady in life, and I'm a pretty cool guy. And I think that we both turned out, even though we came from different things and went in two different directions, and that's part of life. And to say that well, this was wrong or this was right, I think is a waste of money and time. I think it's wiser to go in there and find out how, no matter what happens, serves you. If you can teach your children how to be resilient and adaptable, well, that's probably going to be to their advantage. So by you learning how to do that, by you clearing out your wounds and finding out how, no matter what's happened in your life, how you can use it to your advantage, gives them an example of what's possible to do the same. So that's pretty cool. But no matter what you've done or not done, you're worthy of love. And the same thing for your kids. And they're going through their journey, and they're in a different environment than you, and they're living in a different time than you with different factors and different variables and different needs. So beware. Beware of the people preying on you about how you should be and have to be and got to be. Otherwise, you're a bad parent or whatever. Love your kids, love yourself, and embrace the polarities of life, and basically do what you can to, give them the greatest opportunity in life. And that basically showing them how to be resilient and adaptable and to find out what's really important to them and live by priority. Those are great ideals. But at the same time, don't beat yourself up if you don't live up and compare yourself to other people. Compare your daily actions to your own ambitions and drives, and teach your children to do the same and not compare themselves to others. Because if you compare yourself to others, you're guaranteed to have a distorted view about you. And most of the people you think you put on pedestals or pits aren't who you think. If you put people on pedestals, you're blind to their downsides. If you put people in pits, you're blind to their upsides. And if you put them on pedestals or pits, you'll put yourself in pits and pedestals. And neither one of them are authentic. So love yourself enough to embrace both sides of yourself, and love other people enough to see both sides of them. And don't be fooled by facades. If you do, you won't be vulnerable to ideals and moral hypocrisies about how you should be. Just love your kids. There's an innate, intuitive feedback system inside us to help us become authentic and to help us come into sustainable, fair exchange and to love and to appreciate people. And if we listen to that and follow our highest priorities, where we are most executive function and most self-governed, we'll do well with our children. And just know that no matter what, your kids are going to like and dislike half of you. I'm sure that if I was to ask my kids, what do you like and dislike, they could come up with a list, and I could do the same. But bottom line is, love is a combination of things you like and dislike. That's the truth about love anyway. So love your kids, embrace both sides of yourself and them, and let's get on with appreciating, no matter what's happened, how it serves, and teach your children how to be resilient. If you do, the best way to do it is by you doing it yourself. Anyway, I just wanted to share a few ideas on that. And that's the reason why I teach people the breakthrough experience and have people come to that, because in there I show you how to take the things you're judging in yourself, that you're beating yourself up about, or beating other people about and judging in them, which is the source of your beating yourself up. Anytime you put them on a pedestal, if you don't know how to bring them off the pedestal and you out of the pit, or bring them out of the pit and you off the pedestal, if you don't know how to do that, come to the breakthrough experience so I can show you how to do that. If you're beating yourself up because you think you messed up as a parent, come to the breakthrough experience so I can show you how to dissolve that. If you're blaming your family because you thought it was dysfunctional, beware. It's an illusion. Look deeper. There's a way of finding the hidden order in the apparent chaos. And I love helping people do that in the breakthrough experience, because it can change their whole perspective and no longer be angry and victim of this so-called history they have, which then makes them go to the opposite extreme only to teach them the lesson. Your children are going to express your repressions. And if you're repressing things because you don't want to be like a parent that you're judging, you're going to create a cycle every other generation. But if you learn to appreciate both sides of your family, your parents, and love both sides of yourself, and demonstrate that for your children, you're probably going to do pretty well, because they're going to end up learning how to love both sides of themselves, because you got both sides. So, trying to get rid of half of yourself and be only one side is futile. You don't need to get rid of half of yourself to love yourself. That's why I want people to come to the breakthrough experience, so they can learn to love their whole self and love other people for the way they are. Because when you love people for who they are, they turn into who you love. So just know, love your kids. The bottom line, that's the bottom line. Did they make it? Anyway, I've got 3 beautiful children. They're all different. And they all have different views about me and things they like and dislike about me and a mom. And that's part of the journey. And but bottom line is, I know they love me and I love them. And that's what you want to do. So anyway, I just wanted to share with you some ideas on parenting. And I really hope that you come to the breakthrough experience. I know the breakthrough experience is eye-opening, mind-expanding, life-changing, trajectory-altering, and in fulfilling the path of fulfillment, because I know it can make a difference. I've seen thousands and thousands of people transform their lives and resolve the issues they have with their family.